Majestic 12 was the purported organisation behind faked government documents delivered anonymously to multiple ufologists in the early 1980s. All individuals who received the fake documents were connected to Bill Moore. After the publication of the Roswell incident, Richard Doty and other individuals presenting themselves as Air Force intelligence officers approached Moore. They used the unfulfilled promise of hard evidence of extraterrestrial retrievals to recruit Moore, who kept notes on other ufologists and intentionally spread misinformation within the UFO community. At a 1989 Mutual UFO Network conference, Bill Moore confessed that he had intentionally fed fake evidence of extraterrestrials to UFO researchers, including Paul Benowitz. Doty would later say that he intentionally gave fabricated information to UFO researchers while working at Kirtland Air Force Base in the 1980s. Roswell conspiracy proponents turned on Moore, but not the broader conspiracy theory. The Majestic 12 materials have been heavily scrutinised and discredited. The various purported memos existed only as copies of photographs of documents. Carl Sagan criticised the complete lack of provenance of documents miraculously dropped on a doorstep like something out of a fairy story, perhaps the elves and the shoemaker. Researchers noted the idiosyncratic date format not found in government documents from the time they were purported to originate, but widely used in Bill Moore's personal notes. In this variant of the Roswell legend, the bodies were ejected from the craft shortly before it exploded over the ranch. The propulsion unit is destroyed, and the government concludes that the ship was a short-range reconnaissance craft. The following week, the bodies are recovered some miles away, decomposing from exposure and predators. The initial claims of recovered alien bodies from the second-hand accounts of Barney Barnett and Pappy Henderson after their deaths. On August 5, 1989, Stanton Friedman interviewed former mortician Glenn Dennis. Dennis provided an account of extraterrestrial corpses endorsed by prominent Roswell ufologists Don Berliner, Stanton Friedman, Kevin Randall, and Don Schmidt. Dennis claimed to have received 4 or 5 calls from the airbase with questions about body preservation and inquiries about small or hermetically sealed caskets. He further claimed that a local nurse told him she had witnessed an alien autopsy. Glenn Dennis had been called the star witness of the Roswell incident. On September the 20th, 1989, an episode of Unsolved Mysteries included the second-hand stories of alien bodies captured by the Army and transported to Texas. The episode was watched by 28 million people. In 1994, Dennis's account was portrayed by Unsolved Mysteries and dramatised in the made-for-TV movie Roswell. Dennis appeared in multiple books and documentaries. In 1991, Dennis co-founded a UFO museum in Roswell along with Max Little and former RAAF Public Affairs Officer Walter Holt. Dennis provided false names for the nurse who allegedly witnessed the autopsy. Presented with evidence that no such person existed, Dennis admitted to lying about the name. Carl Flock observed that Dennis's story sounds like a B-grade thriller conceived by Oliver Stone. Scientific skeptic author Brian Dunning said that Dennis cannot be regarded as a reliable witness, considering that he had seemingly waited over 40 years before he started recounting a series of unconnected events. Such events, Dunning argues, were then arbitrarily joined to a form of what has become the most popular narrative of the alleged alien crash. Prominent UFO researchers, including Flock and Kevin Randall, have become convinced that no bodies were recovered from the Roswell crash. A proliferation of competing Roswell accounts led to a schism among ufologists in the early 1990s. The 2 leading UFO societies disagreed on the scenarios represented by Randall Schmidt and Friedman Berliner. One issue was the location of Barnett's account. A 1992 UFO conference attempted to achieve consensus among the various scenarios portrayed in the crash at Corona and the UFO crash at Roswell. However, the publication of The Truth About the UFO Crash at Roswell resolved the Barnett problem by simply ignoring Barnett and citing a new location for the alien craft recovery, including a new group of archaeologists not connected to the Barnett story. In 1991, Kevin Randall and Donald Schmidt published UFO Crash at Roswell. The 1991 book sold 160,000 copies and served as the basis for the 1994 television film Roswell. Randall and Schmidt added testimony from 100 new witnesses. Though hundreds of people were interviewed by various researchers, only a few claimed to have seen debris or aliens. According to Flock, of the 300 plus individuals reportedly interviewed for a UFO crash at Roswell, only 23 could reasonably thought to have been physical evidence of debris. Of these, only 7 asserted anything suggestive of otherworldly origins for the debris. The book claimed that General Arthur Exon had been aware of debris and bodies, but Exon disputed his depiction. Glenn Dennis's claim of an alien autopsy in Grady Barnett's alien body accounts appeared in the book. However, the dates and locations of Barnett's account of the Roswell incident were changed without explanation. Roswell was described as leading the army to a second crash site on the ranch, where the army personnel were supposedly horrified to find civilians there already. Also in 1991, retired USAF Brigadier General Thomas DuBose, who had posed with debris for press photographs in 1947, acknowledged the weather balloon cover story. In 1992, Stanton Friedman released Crash at Corona, co-authored with Don Berliner. The book introduced new witnesses and added to the narrative by doubling the number of flying saucers to 2 and the number of aliens to 8, 2 of which were said to have survived and been taken into custody by the government. Friedman interviewed Lydia Sleppy, the teletype operator who years earlier had said that she was ordered not to transmit a crashed saucer story. Friedman attributed Sleppy's account to FBI usage of an alleged nationwide surveillance system that he believed was put in place following an earlier crash. However, no evidence was found that the FBI had ever monitored any transmissions from her radio station. Friedman's description of her typing as interrupted by an FBI message and Moore's claims that the machine suddenly stopped itself were found to be impossible for the teletype model that Sleppy operated in 1947. In 1994, Randall and Schmidt authored another book, The Truth About the UFO Crash at Roswell, which claimed a cargo plane delivered alien bodies to Dwight D. Eisenhower. The book abandoned the Barnett crash site at the plains of San Augustine as lacking evidence and contradicting its framework of the Roswell event. Randall and Schmidt proposed a new crash site 35 miles north of Roswell based on statements from Jim Ragsdale and Frank Kaufman. Kaufman claimed he monitored a UFO's path on radar and recovered debris from a crashed spaceship similar in shape to an F-117 stealth fighter. Kaufman's statements did not match the personnel at the base, his service record, the radio technology available, or the known topography of the proposed crash site. Jim Ragsdale claimed that while driving home along Highway 285 with his girlfriend Trudy Truelove, they watched a craft that was narrow with bat-like wings crash. A later interview with Ragsdale clarified that his alleged crash site was nowhere near either the purported Barnett or Kaufman sites. In further interviews, Ragsdale's story grew to include bizarre details such as Ragsdale and Truelove removing 11 golden helmets from the alien craft to bury in the desert. Under pressure from a New Mexico congressman and the General Accounting Office, the Air Force provided official responses to Roswell conspiracy theories during the mid-1990s. The initial 1994 USAF report admitted that the weather balloon explanation was a cover story, but for Project Mogul, a military surveillance program. Published the following year, the Roswell Report, Fact versus Fiction in the New Mexico Desert, supported this with extensive documentation that narrowed the cause of the debris to a specific Mogul balloon train launched on the June 4th, 1947 and lost near the Roswell debris field. Within the UFO community, the reports were not accepted. UFO researchers dismissed the report as containing no information about MJ-12 or extraterrestrial corpses, but noted the reports did admit the 1947 account to have been false. Contemporary polls found the majority of Americans doubted the Air Force's explanation. News media and skeptical researchers embraced the findings. Project Mogul offered a cohesive explanation for contemporary accounts of the debris, failing only to explain later conflicting additions. Carl Sagan and Philip Klass noted the symbols from the 1947 debris, described by Jesse Marcel Jr. as alien hieroglyphics, were easily explained as matching the symbols on the adhesive tape that Project Mogul sourced from a New York toy manufacturer. In 1997, the Air Force published a second report, the Roswell Report, Case Closed. It detailed how eyewitness accounts of military personnel loading aliens into body bags matched the Air Force's procedures for retrieving parachute test dummies in insulation bags designed to shield temperature-sensitive equipment in the desert. Pseudo-documentaries, most notably Alien Autopsy Fact or Fiction, have taken a major role in shaping popular opinion of Roswell. In 1995, British entrepreneur Ray Santley claimed to have footage of an alien autopsy filmed after the 1947 Roswell crash, purchased from an elderly Army Air Force cameraman. Alien Autopsy centres around Santilli's hoaxed footage, which it represents as a probate artefact of the government's investigation into Roswell. The purported cameraman, Barnett, had died in 1967 without ever serving in the military. And visual effects expert Stan Winston told newspapers that Alien Autopsy had misrepresented his conclusion that Santilli's footage was obvious fake. Santilli would admit years later that the footage was fabricated. Over 20 million viewers watched the purported autopsy. Fox aired the programme immediately before and implicitly connected to the fictional X-Files, which later parodied the film. Alien Autopsy established a template for future pseudo-documentaries built on questioning a presumed government cover-up. Though thoroughly debunked, core UFO believers, many of whom still accepted earlier hoaxes like the Aztec crash, weighed the autopsy footage as additional evidence strengthening the connection between Roswell and extraterrestrials. In 1997, retired Army intelligence officer Philip J. Corso released The Day After Roswell before the incident's 50th anniversary. Corso's book combined many existing and conflicting conspiracies with his own claims. Corso alleged that he was shown a purportedly non-human body suspended in liquid inside a glass coffin. The Day After Roswell contains many factual errors and inconsistencies. For example, Corso says the 1947 debris was shipped to Fort Bliss, Texas, headquarters of the 8th Army Air Force. All other Roswell books correctly located the 8th Army Air Force headquarters at Fort Worth Army Air Field, 500 miles away. Corso further claimed that he helped to oversee a project to reverse engineer recovered crash debris. Other ufologists expressed doubts about Corso's book. Don Schmidt openly questioned if Corso was part of this information Schmidt believed was working to discredit ufology. Corso's story was criticised for its similarities to science fiction like The X-Files and the film Terminator 2. Lacking evidence, the book relied on weight provided by Corso's past work on the Foreign Technology Division and a foreword from the US Senator and World War II veteran Strom Thurmond. Corso had misled Thurmond to believe that he was providing a foreword for a different book. Upon discovering the book's actual contents, Thurmond demanded the publisher remove his name and writing from future printings, stating, "I did not and would not pen the foreword to a book about or containing a suggestion that the success of the United States in the Cold War is attributable to the technology found on a crashed UFO." Roswell has remained the subject of divergent popular works, including those by ufologist Walter Bosley, paranormal author Nick Redfern, and American journalist Annie Jacobsen. In 2011, Jacobsen's Area 51, an uncensored history of America's top secret military base, featured a claim that Nazi doctor Joseph Mengele was recruited by Soviet leader Joseph Stalin to produce grotesque child-size aviators to cause hysteria. The book was criticized for extensive errors by scientists from the Federation of American Scientists. Historian Richard Rhodes, writing in the Washington Post, also criticized the book's sensationalistic reporting of old news and its error-ridden reporting. The 2013 documentary Mirage Men suggests there was a conspiracy by the US military to fabricate UFO folklore in order to deflect attention from classified military projects. The book is also called Mirage Men and was published in 2010 by Constable and Robinson. In September 2017, UK newspaper The Guardian reported on Kodachrome slides which some had claimed showed a dead space alien. First presented at a Be Witness event in Mexico organised by Jamie Mawson and attended by almost 7,000 people, days afterwards it was revealed the slides were in fact of a mummified Native American child discovered in 1896 and which had been on display at the Chapin Mesa Archaeological Museum in Mesa Verde, Colorado for many decades. In February 2020, an Air Force historian revealed a recently declassified report of a circa 1951 incident in which 2 Roswell personnel donned poorly fitting radioactive suits, complete with oxygen masks, while retrieving a weather balloon after an atomic test. On one occasion, they encountered a lone woman in the desert who fainted when she saw them. One of the personnel suggests they could have appeared to someone unaccustomed to the modern gear to be alien. Secrecy around the initial incident was due to Cold War military programs rather than aliens. Contrary to the evidence, UFO believers maintain that a spacecraft crashed near Roswell, and Roswell remains synonymous with UFOs. B.D. Gildenberg has claimed that the Roswell incident, the world's most famous, most exhaustively investigated, and most thoroughly debunked UFO claim. Accounts of an alien recovery sites are contradictory and not present in any 1947 reports. Some accounts are likely distorted memories of recoveries of servicemen in plane crashes or parachute test dummies, as suggested by the Air Force in the 1997 report. Carl Flock argues that proponents of the crash saucer explanation tend to overlook contradictions and absurdities, compiling supporting elements without adequate scrutiny. Cal Korff attributes the poor research standards to financial incentives. A 1994 USAF report identified the crash object from the 1947 incident as a Project Mogul device. Mogul, the classified portion of an unclassified New York University atmospheric research project, was a military surveillance program employing high-altitude balloons to monitor nuclear tests. The project launched flight number 4 from Alamogordo Army Air Field on June the 4th. Flight number 4 was drifting towards Corona within 17 miles of Brazos Branch, wherein its tracking equipment failed. The military, charged with protecting the classified project, claimed that the crash was part of a weather balloon. Major Jesse Marcel and USAF Brigadier General Thomas DuBose publicly described the claims of a weather balloon as a cover story in 1978 and 1991, respectively. In the USAF report, Richard Weaver states that the weather balloon story may have been intended to deflect interest from Mogul, or it may have been the perception of the weather officer because Mogul balloons were constructed from the same materials. Sheridan W. Cavett, who accompanied Marcel to the debris field, provided a sworn witness statement for the report. Cavett stated, "I thought at the time and think so now that this debris was from a crashed balloon." Ufologists had previously considered that the possibility that the Roswell debris had come from a top-secret balloon. In March 1990, John Keel proposed that the debris had been from a Japanese balloon bomb launched in World War II. An Air Force meteorologist rejected Keel's theory, explaining that the balloons could not possibly have stayed aloft for 2 years. Project Mogul was first connected to Roswell by independent researcher Robert G. Todd in 1990. Todd contacted ufologists, and in the 1994 book Roswell in Perspective, Carl Flock agreed that the Brazos Ranch debris was from Mogul. In response to a 1993 inquiry from U.S. Congressman Stephen Schiff of New Mexico, the General Accounting Office launched an inquiry and directed the Office of the United States Secretary of the Air Force to conduct an internal investigation. Air Force Declassification Officer Lieutenant James McAndrew concluded, "When the civilians and personnel from Roswell AAF stumbled upon the highly classified project and collected the debris, no one at Roswell had a need to know about information concerning Mogul. This fact, along with the initial misidentification and subsequent rumours about the capture of a flying disc occurred, ultimately left many people with unanswered questions that have endured to this day." The 1947 Roswell accounts did not mention alien bodies. The reports of bodies came decades later. None of the primary eyewitnesses mentioned bodies. Jesse Marcel dismissed the reports when asked, and Roswell authors interviewed only 4 people with supposed first-hand knowledge of alien bodies. The claims of alien bodies made decades later by elderly witnesses, sometimes as deathbed confessions, contradict each other in basic details, such as the location of the crash, the number of extraterrestrials, and the description of the bodies. The 1997 Air Force report concluded that the alleged bodies reported by later eyewitnesses came from memories of accidents involving military casualties and memories of the recovery of anthropomorphic dummies. Military programs such as the 1950s Operation High Dive released test dummies from high-altitude balloons above the New Mexico desert. The Air Force concluded that the number of accounts of body retrievals suggested an explanation other than dishonesty, and that the retrieval process for their dummies resembled the body retrieval stories in many aspects. The dummies were transported using stretchers, casket-shaped crates, and sometimes insulation bags that resembled body bags. Descriptions of weapon carriers and a Jeep-like truck that had a bunch of radios matched the Dodge M37 used for the 1950s test retrievals. Eyewitnesses described the purported bodies as bald dummies resembling plastic dolls and wearing flight suits. These attributes were consistent with Air Force dummies used in the 1950s. The mythology of Roswell, involving increasingly elaborate accounts of alien crash landings and government cover-ups, has been analysed and documented by social anthropologists and skeptics. Anthropologists Susan Harding and Kathleen Stewart highlight the Roswell story as a prime example of how a discourse moved from the fringes to the mainstream, aligning with the 1980s zeitgeist of public fascination with conspiracy, cover-up and repression. Skeptics Joe Nickell and James McGaha proposed that Roswell's time spent away from public attention allowed the development of a mythology drawing from later UFO folklore, and that the early debunking of the incident created space for ufologists to intentionally distort accounts towards sensationalism. Charles Ziegler argues that the Roswell story exhibits characteristics typical of traditional folk narratives. He identifies 6 distinct narratives and a process of transmission through storytellers, wherein a core story was formed from various witness accounts and then shaped and altered by those involved in the UFO community. Additional witnesses were sought to expand upon the core narrative, while accounts did not align with the prevailing beliefs were discredited or excluded by the gatekeepers.
If you like that, then listen to our main show every Wednesday on all good podcast providers. It's Alive, the really, really fake true crime horror podcast. All the guts and gore, none of the guilt. See you on Wednesdays.